This is the setup guide for Safe City Module 3, PI Planning. This module can be played standalone, just like Module 1. It works beautifully if you play it in conjunction with Modules 1 and 2. You get a lovely end-to-end flow from formation of vision through prioritized epics, through a feature roadmap into PI Planning. But you can also just use it by itself. In fact, I've done it for years as a replacement for geek books when I'm teaching a leading safe. If you're playing it standalone, you're going to need to set up your participants into 4 groups. Otherwise, you just keep the groups you had in Module 1 and make sure that you give the groups their handouts. Now, each group gets a dedicated handout because each team has a different flavor. Along with their instruction handout, they will have a planning board, and whichever handout you give the team, that's the flavor of the team that they're going to be. So the handout you give them with the sample plan is really just there so they've got a template to work from when they set up their wall. I would recommend a wall, a window near them, using post-it notes to indicate sprint by sprint, and of course post-it notes to indicate their available velocity in each of those sprints. The planning features: if you're playing in person, print a set off. The PDF's included. There's an A4 version, a US letter version, so that you've got physical handouts available in the room for the features. Virtually, of course, they're all there on the Miro board. If you're running virtual and you haven't already done this for modules 1 and 2, things to be aware of. In module 1, you had 2 options. You could run with anonymous voting or Miro voting. For PI planning, there is no voting required, so it doesn't matter if you're playing it in sequence. Continue to use whichever version you played for modules 1 and 2. If you're playing standalone, I would generally just use the Anon board for simplicity. Setting up the groups: if you're standalone, make sure you've set up the anonymous board, renamed it something appropriate, double-checked all the links and content locks to make sure people can't actually accidentally destroy it while they're in the middle of things, and optionally pre-populate the avatar names. Bit of extra information on setting it up: hide the module 1 and 2 frames, reveal the module 3 frames. You just got to select one of the frames. They're all grouped. Hit unhide. It will unhide all of the module 3 frames. It's also just cleaner for your participants to hide modules 1 and 2 so they're not distracted. To create your groups, if you are playing standalone, watch this video. Otherwise, keep moving. There's no beer or wine when you play virtually, but you want it to be as engaging as possible. I always start by getting people engaged with the board and organised into groups before I start the context briefing. This makes sure everyone is actually on the Miro board and gives you a bit of opening laughter. I open with the line: if we were here in person, you would have walked in, looked around the room, seen who was sitting there, and picked the people you wanted to sit with. We're going to do that virtually. First, you'll create an avatar to represent your virtual self. Then you'll pick who you want to sit with. One final note before we demo: the demo includes people setting their own names. I like to do it this way because it gets that bit of extra engagement as they choose an icon that resonates with them, but you can save a few minutes off the playtime by pre-populating them. All the avatars are pre-grouped with the name labels. Players name them by double-clicking on the name label. They claim a seat at the table by moving their avatar onto the seat. If Eric wants to avoid me, he can choose a seat at a different table. As the tables fill, you can jump in and offer guidance or an intervening mouse and keyboard to anyone who's struggling. The virtual table looks like this. It's laid out slightly differently in the Miro, but there are 2 frames they'll work in. One of those frames is a story breakdown area that has instructions for story patterns and sizes. The other has the sprint by sprint plan, and there are a set of pre-sized post-its that color match the features they'll be working on in their story breakdown areas. When you're setting the context, 3 ways you could do it. You can talk to the provided context setup deck that comes in the kit, because of course we're Creative Commons. If you want to customize that deck, feel free to just retain the attribution. You could make your own complete deck. Or if all else fails, you can watch the context setting video from me where I do a sample run through of the deck. My personal recommendation would be watch the video to get a clue as to how I tell the story, and then use the PowerPoint yourself. It's always much nicer for people to hear a live talk. than to watch a video. Once you're done, just set a time box and go. Generally around 20 minutes for in-person play. Virtually, give them maybe 30. Total time box, sort of 35 minutes in person, 45 minutes virtually. So you're looking for 5 to 7 minutes to set the context, 20 to 30 minutes to play, 10 minutes to debrief. First few times you facilitate it, give yourself an extra 15 minutes. So schedule it for an hour and you'll be able to complete it very comfortably. As you'll have known if you've watched the briefing guide already, there are 3 optional extensions. You can play the PI planning standalone. It just helps them understand the mechanics of the way team breakouts and sprint plans work. But you can also run a PI objectives extension, building the artboard and roaming the risks. There's only brief guidance here because they're pretty self-explanatory. You can use any of them by itself. You can use all of them. I've pretty regularly had arts that were feeling nervous heading into their first PI planning and said, hey, look, we want to give the teams a really in-depth workshop. And we've constructed kind of half a day where we've run through the planning, the objectives, the artboard, the roaming of the risks to have them feel comfort with all of the mechanics. And then we've done some extra work on story breakdown, because it's really a question of, are you doing this so that leadership understand PI planning and their role in it? Or are you doing it because you want teams to feel confidence? It'll work both ways. So for the PI objectives extension, there is a objective frame provided. You just need to reveal it when you want to play it. It's a pretty straightforward one. It's around about 10 minutes. Big hint here is you want to debrief the main planning before you play PI objectives. You want to process the learning piece by piece, as opposed to running a very long series and then debriefing it all at once. The value of the PI objectives, well, firstly, it helps people understand what PI objectives are and why we use them. It also creates some interesting discussions when you have complex team interrelationships and how that turns up in your objectives. The second extension is the art planning board. There is a template provided if you're playing virtually. If you're playing physically, you will need to create some kind of visual on a wall or window. Again, it's a pretty straightforward exercise. Give teams about 10 minutes to try building it. Gives them comfort with the mechanics of the board, creates an interesting discussion on the appropriate granularity of promises or dependency cards, and what kinds of things should show up as outcomes. Lucky last is risk roaming. Once again, single frame provided. What you'll find with the risk roaming is it's set up for you to model the way risk roaming works. To prime it, you collect the team's risks from their planning boards. You drop them in the art risk. Of course, they won't all be art risks, but that's part of the facilitation. You play it to give teams clarity on the usefulness of raising risks as they plan, the separation between team risks and art risks, an understanding of the Rome model, and the way that it might factor into their confidence vote. That's the setup for PI planning. Watch the facilitation video to find out how to get the most from the play, and the debrief video to understand how to debrief it and draw out the maximum possible insights. Thank you very much.